Hey, what's going on guys? My name is Rampage and welcome to my Metro Last Light Redux benchmark video. Now the settings that I will be using, I'll show you guys closer up in a second, but the settings I'll be using is 1080p, quality very high, SSAA on, texture filtering AF 16 times, motion blurred and normal because it can't go any higher, tessellation very high, VSync off, advanced physics on. So apparently they still only want to give us one scene for a benchmark, but alrighty then, let's get into it. Let's see the frames. Let's see how it actually performs. So it's 99% GPU usage, little under a gigabyte I mean. Let's see how far up that megabytes go. Currently it's at, gigabytes. It's at 1.16 gigabytes at 30 frames per second. Okay, I don't know whether this is because of my overclock. This is a slight overclock. I think it's like 83 or plus 80 on the core and 245 on the memory. Now most games seem to get a decent performance boost, but apparently this one, I believe it's due to SSAA, simply because 30 frames per second is just absolute dreadful to play with, so I don't really recommend you even turning on SSAA during the game because, well, it depends on how well it runs and what SSAA it will be using. I believe in Metro 2033 Redux it has 0.5 times 1, 2, 3, 4 times SSAA. Now that shit would be intense to run it 4 times. I don't know whether this is running it 4 times, but it just says on or off. So it's kind of hard to actually justify what it's actually using, but it looks like it may be using 2 times, maybe 4 times. So that would justify the frame rate. But if it's not, and it's only using like 0.5 or 1 times or 2 times, then that's gonna halve your frame rate dramatically. Now, to actually get a benefit out of that, you would probably have to have something like a 780 Ti, or even a Titan. I'm not saying that you need those cards, but I'm saying if you want to use SSAA any higher than 0.5, 1, or 2, you'll probably need one of those cards, or even 2. But yeah, SSAA is basically, it kind of double resolution the entire image, right? It basically, if you have SSAA turned to 2 times, it is doubling the resolution on screen. So that's why I believe that's how it works. The anti-aliasing and stuff like that gets dramatically reduced when you do that sort of thing. So as I said, I don't know how much SSAA it's using, but it does look like a lot. For me anyway, I don't know. I'm just hoping the game doesn't actually run like this, because if it does, 4A, we're going to have some issues, buddy. We are going to have some issues. But anyway, that's my benchmark. Now, once it closes, there we go. Now, I'll make this a little bit bigger so I don't actually have to zoom in. There we go. Okay, so you can see the settings that I was playing with. 1080p, very high, SSAA on, texture filtering, AF 16 times, motion blur normal, tessellation, very high, VSync off, advanced physics on. So down here you can see average frame rate of 32.72 frames per second, max frames per second 101.58 frames per second, minimum frames per second 4.87 frames per second. I believe the minimum frames per second is due to the actual benchmark itself loading, and the max frame rate is due to the benchmark ending. So it's not really those two frame rates aren't really justified really, because when you end a benchmark, it shouldn't count the last like 5 seconds, because most of the time you'll find that the benchmark results or the frame rate will either dramatically increase or dramatically drop. So over here you'll see the frame rate fluctuation. So at the start of the benchmark, it was around 50 frames per second. Let me just zoom that in a little bit so you guys can actually see it more clearly. So at the start of the benchmark, it was around 50 frames per second, slowly going down to 40, and then roughly about 42 frames, it started going up to 50 again. Then from there, it dramatically dropped to around 30, 25, and 22 frames per second. So basically, yeah, that's more or less the average of about 30 frames per second, which is not ideal for PC. For console, sure, if it's stable 30 frames per second, then that's fine, but you can see that this fluctuation is fluctuating dramatically, and that's not something that we PC gamers want to see. So if we go ahead and turn off motion blur SSAA, now let's see what the results we get. Run. Okay, see 85, 60, there we go. See, that's the frame rate I'm talking about, 65 frames per second, that's good. That's a good, stable frame rate. 67, 72, 78, 81, 84, 80, ooh, 93, 96, 97, 97 frames per second is the highest so far, dropped to about 40, 39 frames, 38, 37, 36, 35. So around here it drops because there's heaps of people, and I believe because it's got heaps of physics and stuff. So it dropped to about 35 frames per second. With less memory usage. But it still looks like there's some form of anti-aliasing on. I don't know whether it's their analytical AA and how much analytical AA they might be using. Because in the last two games, in Metro Last Light and Metro 2033, they used a technique called analytical AA, which was basically their form of anti-aliasing. It was a low taxing form of anti-aliasing, which got rid of most of the jaggies, but as you can see here, it still has a little bit. But I believe this time around it's a little bit less than in Last Light. I'm not too sure though. I could be wrong, but that's what it looks like from first impressions anyway. Now, again, I don't know whether they are actually using, sorry, I'll get it right in a minute, analytical AA, because I assume they do, because they did in the other two. So let me move this over a little bit. So you can see that this benchmark is actually using a lot of my CPU. It's around about 70 to 92% on most of the cores. Right here, most of the cores are on 92%, which is really, really taxing. But my CPU is doing good at 51 Celsius, so it's not doing too bad. My GPU is at 67 degrees. So that's not too bad either. I was running Heaven Benchmark the other day, and I was getting around 72 to 73 degrees. So anyway, let's see what the fluctuation is like now. Because I'm one of those people that I don't really want to turn off a lot of shit. But anyway, let's compare both of them. So you can see that. Oh, you probably can't actually. Let me just zoom in. Zoom in there. So this is the first benchmark. So average frame rate of 32.72 frames per second, whereas the other benchmark, the one we just did, 57.21 frames per second. So that's a massive, massive improvement. Now again, max frame rate and minimum frame rate, I don't really take those into account in this benchmark, simply because they just get to random points and it's like boop, just for like a second. So as you can see right here, where it's all the way up to 101. Now in the next one, it skips that and does it towards the end and does 162 frames per second with a minimum of 18. So as you can see here, you can see these little, hold on a second, you can see these little black marks where it actually dips for that quick second and then comes back up. Now that little jolt, those little jolts you see there, are really bad for playing. Because if you're dropping, you will see a slight maybe 1 to 2 second delay where your mouse kind of just like slows down and it feels really weird. But anyway, that's just the actual benchmark. I hope the in-game performance is a lot better. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed my benchmark for Metro Last Light Redux. My name is Rampage. Please don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Peace out.